Get ready to delve into a world of mystery and suspense, where threads of crime, deceit, and betrayal intersect in a narrative that sheds light on the life of a man who transitioned from the depths of darkness and murder to the light of hope and humanity. This compelling and thrilling tale tells the story of Alexander Solonik, who lived a double life as a legendary figure in the Russian underworld. In a world where Russian mafia vies for power and status, Alexander emerges as a mythical figure, possessing unique abilities in killing and control, striking unparalleled fear in the hearts of his enemies and adversaries. His story began as a poor boy from Kurgan, but he quickly joined the ranks of the mafia, becoming an integral part of the largest mafia gangs in Russia. However, as he delved deeper into the underworld, Alexander began to challenge the established order and eliminate his competitors with cold blood. Thanks to his skill and mastery, he became known as the super killer, from whom no one could escape. But when he reaches the pinnacle of his power, a moment of life-changing transformation occurs as he finds himself facing an enemy that cannot be defeated. Will Alexander be able to escape from this enemy that threatens to destroy everything he has built, or will his relentless journey come to an end here? In the face of dark forces and human tyranny, discover this and more in this thrilling story that takes you on a perilous journey filled with risks and suspense.
Alexander Solonik was born on October 16, 1960, in the city of Kurgan in the Urals region of the Soviet Union, to a poor family. From a young age, he showed immense strength, a strong sense of justice, and an unusually intense Russian nationalism. He loved weapons, wrestling, brawling, and masculine sports, and all his friends were of a similar nature. Ironically, the lives of his closest friends took a completely different turn as they grew older. Much like Alexander, after completing high school, Alexander received his conscription notice. In the Soviet Union, conscription was mandatory, and the conscription notice was akin to a death warrant for many Russians and Soviet citizens. However, Alexander celebrated this notice and hastily packed his belongings to go. He was assigned to a tank unit and then sent to the Soviet occupation forces in East Germany, according to official records. However, according to rumors, he was not just an ordinary soldier in a tank unit that was merely a cover. Some rumors suggested that he was a high-ranking intelligence officer from the elite Russian intelligence, trained in the combat art of Sambo, silent assassinations, infiltration operations, espionage, counterterrorism, and counter-espionage. He was entrusted with difficult missions to assassinate spies and officers of the NATO alliance in West Germany. After completing his mandatory conscription, he joined the Russian Police Academy and underwent further training. Upon graduation, he was sent to work in patrols under the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia. This made the rumors more believable, as the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia does not accept just anyone. Only the highest and strongest soldiers are allowed to join. However, after 6 months, a strong verbal altercation occurred between him and a higher-ranking officer, sparked by his brutal methods of arrest, without mentioning his killing operations. Alexander was the type to earn respect based on how he treated people, rather than his rank, which angered this officer. Alexander was extremely harsh in dealing with criminals, and perhaps his Russian nationalist tendencies were the main reason for this. Because the Ministry of Internal Affairs is akin to the state's fortress, and most of its work relates to national security, you can imagine what brutal methods meant in a country like Russia, especially during the Soviet era. This indicates that Alexander was merciless and brutal in dealing with criminals. Due to this altercation, Alexander was dismissed from service, shattering his dreams. He returned to Kurgan, a miserable city. After his return, he worked as a gravedigger in the main cemetery. One of his colleagues at work was a childhood friend, and the rest were familiar faces in that small town. Despite working in the most dismal place for 10 hours a day, it brought him some psychological comfort. Throughout his life, Alexander spent time with many women and got some tattoos on his body. However, he decided to settle down and marry in his hometown. He did marry, and his marriage resulted in a daughter. However, the marriage did not last and ended in divorce. He remarried, and his second wife bore him a child. His life was happy and simple, but it didn't last long. In 1987, one of Alexander Solonik's former girlfriends accused him of raping her. Alexander maintained his innocence, and his friends and colleagues at work testified to his innocence, including Andrei Kolgov, one of his closest friends. The story was clearly fabricated, as the woman changed many details in various sessions. It's highly suspected that the police officer who dismissed him from service not only wanted to dismiss him but also wanted to imprison him, so he fabricated everything. Unfortunately, he succeeded, and Alexander was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Alexander understood everything, so before being sent to prison, he requested 5 minutes alone with his wife and son to bid them farewell. They were granted a separate room, and they were left alone. As soon as the door to the room was closed, Alexander Solonik kissed his wife and son, then broke the window and jumped from the second floor, escaping on foot after several months on the run. The Russian police managed to capture him 190 kilometers north of Kurgan on his way to Siberia. In the almost deserted, icy desert, Alexander walked all that distance through the foothills of the Russian mountains, icy landscapes, and dense forests, demonstrating his strength and endurance. However, this capability was not enough to fight the police, who found him as he was searching for a clinic at the edge of the city to remove his tattoos. He was finally apprehended and sent to prison. In the beginning of his prison term, Alexander spent 6 months in solitary confinement to prevent other inmates from killing him. However, later he was sent to hard labor. On his first day of work, while digging, he received a powerful blow to the back of his head from a shovel. As he regained his composure, he saw 12 inmates surrounding him armed with their shovels and sharp tools, ready to kill him. While the guards turned a blind eye at that moment, Alexander employed his sambo skills and managed to throw one of them down, seizing his shovel. He then engaged in a violent struggle with all of them and succeeded in overcoming them single-handedly. Yes, he defeated 12 armed individuals with shovels alone, despite being ambushed and unarmed. All the prisoners and some of the guards witnessed this incident. From that moment on, no one dared to approach him or even look him in the eye. Whenever he passed by, they would clear the way for him, including the guards who witnessed how he defeated 12 individuals single-handedly. It's truly astonishing that Alexander was not physically imposing. In fact, he was shorter than the average Russian height. This means that half of the inmates who attacked him were taller and larger than him. After spending 2 years in prison, Alexander decided to escape, and he succeeded in doing so using a covert and silent method. He managed to pass through several checkpoints and guard gatherings unnoticed. His previous espionage and stealth training proved invaluable, as they did not discover his escape until it was too late. Upon returning to Kurgan, Alexander Solonik, who had been a staunch Russian nationalist throughout his life, had a deep hatred for criminals and mafia organizations. His expulsion from the police force was due to his brutal methods with them. However, after spending months evading the government and enduring 2 years in prison, including 6 months in solitary confinement and the rest in hard labor, all because of a confrontation with an officer, his nationalist sentiment died, turning into the thing he hated most in his life. Upon his return, Alexander found that his childhood companions and friends had become part of the Russian mafia, forming their own gang, especially his friend Andrei, who had been one of his staunchest defenders during the trial. So he joined them and became a member of their gang. They entrusted him with tasks such as eliminating rivals, and his first assignment was to kill the leader of a major rival gang. He successfully carried out this mission in 1990 when he was still in his 20s, making it his first successful mission. After this, their gang became the strongest in Kurgan, causing other gangs to withdraw to avoid meeting the same fate. At that moment, the entirety of Kurgan seemed to belong to their gang. However, they soon realized that Kurgan and its surroundings would not yield much wealth. This city was originally established to protect Russia from nomadic tribes' attacks and thus held little significance for their ambitions. Therefore, the gang decided to leave Kurgan and move to Moscow, where the mafia and wealth abound. In 1992, the gang arrived in Moscow, and Alexander Solonik was assigned the task of killing Viktor Nikiforov, one of the most professional hitmen. Viktor worked for a powerful mafia and was known for his unwavering weapon and his unbreakable arm. However, Alexander managed to kill him, instilling fear not only in Viktor but also in the entire mafia he worked for. 6 months later, he killed Valery Dlugaschag, another leader of a massive gang. But that wasn't the only daring act he performed in his life. Alexander needed money, so he began to blackmail leaders of rival mafias, including Otar Kvantrishvili, a notorious mafia leader. Even the Russian government feared him. When his comrades warned him to stop because Otar was a dangerous and merciless man, Alexander ignored their advice and continued demanding money. When Otar refused to pay and mocked him, Solonik went and killed him in a solo mission, despite heavy security surrounding him. After killing Utari, everyone became fearful of him, as anyone targeted by Alexander was marked for death. Orders were written to any mafia boss informing them that Alexander had marked them and their families for death. Alexander Solonik acquired several nicknames, including Sasha the Macedonian, Valerianic, and Azrael of the Mafia. But the most significant was the supernatural killer, a title he earned with merit. It didn't matter where or when, or how many guards were present. Once he knew the face and name of his target, they were as good as dead. On one occasion, he was assigned to kill a mafia leader, and when the target learned of this, he fortified himself completely. Alexander was escorted by a fleet of cars surrounded by guards from every angle. He decided to disappear and hide for a while until Alexander forgot about him. On his way to his hiding place, he stepped out of his car, surrounded by guards from every angle, only to be struck by a bullet piercing his head. As the guards realized their leader had been killed, they began to fall to the ground one by one. Alexander Solonik discovered the secret hideout of the mafia leader, and he camped nearby, waiting for him. When the time came, he killed him along with 6 guards from a distance of 275 meters in the darkness of the night. Another story is that he attempted to extort a massive mafia operating in several cities. When they refused to give him money, he killed the leader and all the top members of that mafia, along with their guards. Some of them were killed with knives. Yes, Alexander went to different cities and killed the leaders of those mafias simply because they refused to give him money. Alexander's methods were diverse and mixed. Sometimes he would kill stealthily, resembling a secret police officer, and other times he would storm in like a madman, firing fiercely at everyone in the building. Sometimes he used a knife, sometimes 2 pistols, sometimes an Alaska .47, and sometimes a sniper rifle. Nothing was consistent except the quality of his targets, all of whom were high-ranking figures in the Russian mafia world, leaders and bosses of powerful mafias, even targets that the Russian government feared. The other consistent aspect was his lack of failure. He never failed a mission, no matter how many men he faced. During several years of his work, Alexander Solonik became a real terror. As soon as rival mafias knew that Azrael Mafia was in town, they would flee. And once someone knew they were his next target, they would essentially resign themselves to their fate, knowing their days were numbered. No matter how many guards you had or where you hid, there was no escape from this man. The Russian government began to pursue him at that point. They identified his hideout and chased him through the streets of Moscow. He fled in his car from them, driving with one hand while using a submachine gun with the other. He managed to kill 7 police officers during the pursuit before being shot in the kidney and starting to bleed. Police officers said that Alexander deserved the titles he had been given. He was driving at maximum speed while using a submachine gun with one hand. But what was frightening was that most of his shots hit the police. He could control this weapon with one arm, as if it were a toy. Before he was sentenced to prison, he was sent to a medical facility for treatment until his wound healed, and he remained there for 6 months. During his treatment, he began to learn foreign languages, one of which was Greek, as he was of Greek Orthodox descent and had some background in the language from the prayers he recited. He decided to escape to Greece, because the situation in Russia was becoming increasingly dangerous, especially with the beginning of the collapse of the Soviet Union, which witnessed the rise of Chechen and Tajik mafias after the Russian mafia began to decline. Once he had recovered enough to escape, he fled with an officer working for the mafia. They escaped at night by hooking grappling hooks onto the wall, climbing and fleeing outside where a car was waiting to take them to the next station. Later, he went to the Greek capital, Athens, after faking his death to evade pursuit by the Russian secret police. During his stay in Athens, Alexander underwent plastic surgeries to change his appearance as a precaution. He then established a new mafia, which had connections with the Italian, Russian, and Greek mafias. The main activity of this mafia was smuggling Russian weapons. It consisted of 15 individuals personally chosen by Alexander. He lived a happy life in Greece, the dream of every man, with wealth, weapons, power, villas, cars, and women. One of these women was Miss Russia, whom he brought from Russia to Greece to spend time with him. This life suited a man like him, born into a poor and powerless family, and within a few years, he became a terror to the strongest Russian mafias. In January 1997, Alexander was assigned a mission to kill a leader of the Italian mafia, which he planned to execute. However, on January 31st of the same year, the mission was not carried out, making it the first mission Alexander failed to accomplish. The incident surprised everyone. and the mafias realized that something had happened to him. Within a few hours, the truth became clear: Alexander met his demise at the hands of a hired killer affiliated with one of the Russian mafias seeking revenge on him in one of his villas. He was killed at the age of 36 on January 31st, 1997. The Russian assassin and former Marine infantryman Alexander Pustovalov-Sasha's soldat strangled Alexander Solonik to death in Solonik's villa. In February 1997, the Greek police found many of his possessions, but the most peculiar findings were an arsenal of Russian and non-Russian weapons. His passion for firearms remained with him even when he sought solace away from the tumult of the Russian mafia and its ongoing conflicts, to the extent that he owned an arsenal in a country where possessing military-grade weapons was a crime throughout his life. It was proven that he had killed 43 mafia leaders and high-ranking figures, not to mention the guards and police officers he killed, or the criminals who died at his hands when he was a cop. Some sources even suggested that the number of his mafia victims exceeded 150 men, all killed with his weapon. This excludes those killed by his own mafia on his orders. And here we have reached the end of the biography of Alexander Solonik.